And thank you for braving the elements. The project team are really excited today to have our first official and formal launch for our second annual Accessibility Week. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Quinta Adams. I am an Assistant Vice Provost in Student Affairs. I also co-chair the Accessibility Advisory Committee and have the pleasure and privilege of working with a very dedicated group of folks who have worked diligently over the past year to bring together a fabulous slate of events. Now, this worked earlier. So if you haven't yet had a chance to mix and mingle, you might want to pause that for a little bit, but please do go back and get some refreshments during our presentation. We will in a moment have some welcome and opening remarks from our provost. We will have a message from our Disability Caucus. I have notes in front of me, so I don't actually need to look at the screen. We will also have a message from one of our students here at Dalhousie. Chris Hattie and I, who are co-chairs of the Accessibility Advisory Committee, will give a progress update on the past year and our work on Dalhousie's first accessibility plan. Thrilled to have a spoken word performance by Laura Burke, and then we'll close with information about the week with a member of our project team, Siobhan Smith, and then head to the quad for the flag raising. So, Chris, would you like to come up?
Hi everyone, I'm Chris Hattie. I am the Director of Employee Experience with Human Resources and have the privilege of co-chairing our Accessibility Advisory Committee with Quinta. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the Treaties of Peace and Friendship, which were signed in 1726. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of lands and resources, but recognized Indigenous title and established the rules for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We also recognize that African Nova Scotians are a distinct people whose histories, legacies, and contributions have enriched that part of Mi'kma'ki known as Nova Scotia for over 400 years. Teresa told me not to eat before talking, and that would have been really good advice to follow. I feel like I've got something in my throat now, Teresa. So I do have the privilege of introducing Dr. Frank Harvey, Dalhousie's Provost and Vice President Academic, to provide a welcome and opening remarks. Dr. Harvey is a distinguished academic leader who brings a wealth of experience and a steadfast commitment to higher education. Having served as Dalhousie's acting president and vice chancellor from January to August 2023, Frank has returned to his role as provost and vice president academic with a renewed energy and a steadfast commitment to advancing academic excellence. Dr. Harvey was appointed as Dalhousie's provost and VPA in 2020. Prior to becoming provost, Dr. Harvey served as dean of Dalhousie's Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences from 2016 to 2020 and as chair of the Department of Political Science from 2014 to 2016. A professor in the Department of Political Science, Dr. Harvey has won numerous teaching awards and served as Distinguished Research Professor of International Relations, held the Eric Dennis Memorial Chair in Government and Politics at Dalhousie from 2013 to 2021, the Fulbright Distinguished Visiting Research Chair at Yale University, a NATO Research Fellowship, served as Director of the Center for the Study of Security and Development, and was a Research Fellow for the Canadian Global Affairs Institute. Dr. Frank, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, Chris. I haven't heard that bio in a very long time, so it's a little odd hearing that. It is such a pleasure for me to formally welcome everyone to the launch of Dalhousie's second annual Accessibility Week. As many of you know, maybe many of you don't, we are actually at the midpoint of our strategic plan, Third Century Promise, in which we have explicitly identified our commitment to inclusive excellence across each of the plan's pillars. And among the most critical aspects of our equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility aspirations are the mutually reinforcing imperatives to create inclusive spaces, inclusive services, and communities for all Dalhousie students, faculty, and staff. In 2017, as many of you know, Nova Scotia became only the third province to pass accessibility legislation with a goal of an accessible Nova Scotia by 2030. Our provincial legislation requires public sector bodies, including Dalhousie, to create, share, and act on clearly articulated accessibility plans. Of course, as an educational institution spanning multiple campuses and communities, we acknowledge our obligation to make Dalhousie fully accessible by removing barriers to education, employment, services, spaces, technology, and communications. Dalhousie's first accessibility plan was released in April of 2022, and it includes an integral focus on awareness and capacity building intended to foster a culture of accessibility and equity, to encourage and facilitate the prevention and removal of barriers to participation, and build capacity in these areas for our employees and for our students. This year, Dalhousie's Accessibility Week coincides with the December 3rd annual observance of the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, proclaimed in 1992 by the UN General Assembly. This year's theme is United in Action to Rescue and Achieve the UN's SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, for, with, and by persons with disabilities. The annual observance is a reminder that people are fundamental to everything we do, and that accessibility planning and accessibility implementation, assessment, and accountability is essential to achieving DAO's goals of becoming a national leader in equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, while also contributing to the following sustainability development goals: good health and well-being, quality education, decent work and economic growth, and reducing inequalities. And we have made significant progress over the years, laying much of the groundwork through changes to policies, changes to organizational structures, to classrooms, to meeting spaces, to services, and to resources. As an institution, we will continue to strive to exceed the core requirements set out by the legislation, guided by the following shared values and principles. A diverse and inclusive university enhances how we teach, how we learn, undertake research, work, and engage within and outside Dalhousie. An accessible environment benefits everyone. Removing barriers is key for equitable access to education, research, employment, and services. Foundational to our plan is collaboration on values-based approaches that prioritize first voice, and we uphold accessibility as a fundamental human right. Quinta Adams and Chris Hattie, co-chairs of Dalhousie's Accessibility Advisory Committee, will be sharing some highlights very soon of this past year's work, and I know the project team has a broad range of programming scheduled for this week. So please take some time to check out Dalhousie's accessibility website for the most up-to-date listings. Thank you very much for the invitation to join you today and to launch this week's Accessibility Week. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Dr. Harvey. So before we get started with our list of speakers today, I did want to somewhat, at least in my intro, somewhat acknowledge the folks who were instrumental in pulling together this week. And so thank you to Sydney, to my left here, and to Maritime Profiles, who's doing a live streaming service today. And so welcome all of our online visitors. Today's launch is sponsored by the President's Office, Human Resources and Student Affairs, but also wanted to again acknowledge the wonderful group and dedicated group of people who have come together over the past year to pull together, not pull together because that seems like it's not intentional, to be intentional about what we're doing in respect to awareness and capacity building, and so our part to making Dalhousie more inclusive and trying to reduce and remove the barriers for our students, staff, and faculty. So at this point, I would like to welcome Tara Ewart. Tara is a member of the project team, but also a co-chair of the Disability Faculty and Staff Caucus, to bring some remarks. Unfortunately, we do have to bring regrets on behalf of Dr. Judy McDonald, who is also a co-chair and unable to be with us today.
Hi, I'm Tara Ewart. I am, in fact, one of the co-chairs of the Disability Caucus. I'm also the Senior Educational Developer of Anti-Oppressive and Transformative Education at the Center for Learning and Teaching. I am not here representing all of our chairs, our co-chairs, so Michelle Mahoney from King's is also not here today. I'm not representing everybody from the caucus, and I'm not representing everybody from the disability communities. So I wanted to share that and to use it as a way to explore that everyone with a disability has unique experiences. And so even those of us who may share the same disability as someone else has different experiences. And so so you may have folks who come from other equity denied groups. So for example, folks from a racialized community, folks from the 2S LGBTQ++ community. There are many communities where we have these intersecting identities. I think the one thing that folks with disabilities and folks with disabilities at Dal would agree with is that the one thing that we do share is in one way or another experiences with ableism. And I think it's really important for us, and Dr. Harvey kept referring to barriers, and I think it's barriers that are really important. That's where we need to be focused, because we sometimes think of folks with disabilities from a deficit perspective as opposed to actually identifying that it's the barriers they encounter that are the problem. So when we think about, every time we hear the term disability issues, really what the problem is, the issue is with ableism. So this Accessibility Week is one way for us to start tackling ableism at our institution and beyond. Again, as Dr. Harvey referenced, when we were doing the planning or doing putting together the sub-plans for Accessibility Week for the accessibility accessibility plan that we were putting together, the one message that we heard over and over and over from folks with disabilities is that the primary problem is attitudes and stigma and lack of awareness and understanding. So again, that's another reason why this week is so important. So I wanted to share with you to close how it is that we can all work in terms of the attitudes and awareness and stigma. And I wanted to share with you Kayla Reed. She's the executive director of the St. Louis Action Group. She created this ally framework, and it's so simple, and it empowers each of us to be allies. So each letter of ally stands for something that we can do. So the A stands for always center the impacted. So in this instance, we are centering folks with disabilities. She then says we need to listen and learn from those who live in oppression. So what we are doing is we are listening and learning to the community, and we are taking action based on what the community's priorities are and what the community wants to see. And it's always important that the community comes first, as, for example, the importance of first voice. Now, the second L is leverage your privilege. Once you've learned about different aspects of disability, and it's an ongoing process, if you are a person who doesn't experience disability or experiences some disabilities and not the other, as you listen and learn, what you're learning gives you an opportunity then to leverage your privilege to ensure that we're removing barriers and that we're increasing access and for folks at our institution. So once we've leveraged our privilege, here comes the most important part. That's when we yield the floor. It's when we step back. So it's our job as an ally to start clearing spaces where there are barriers, to identify them, to spot them, to bring attention to them, and that can be in the language that we use, or it can be in seeing that somebody has parked an accessible parking spot and doesn't have a tag. We notice and we take action. So once we've yielded the floor, then that's an opportunity for folks with disabilities to take that space and to say what needs to be said, to take the actions, to drive what it is that the disability community does with the rest of the communities. And finally, as someone with a disability, I have an opportunity also to be an ally to others with disabilities, because like I said, we do not all share the same disabilities and the same experiences. So it's my job too to be an ally to those who have different experiences than I do. Thank you. Oh, and I wish Teresa had also warned me not to eat first, because I'm pretty sure I've got lettuce in my tea.
Thank you, Tara. And I, again, have the privilege and honor of working with you as part of the project team. But you know, your messages always resonate with me, particularly the action part, and then step back. First voice is so absolutely important. Thank you so much. So the next person on our agenda to bring a message to our group is Ishan Aurora. Ishan is a dedicated fourth-year honors student pursuing a Bachelor of Medical Sciences. Born and raised here in Halifax, Ishan has deep roots in the community, having attended and graduated from Citadel High in 2020. Now I'm wondering why it's blurry, because my glasses are in my hand. So in addition to earning certificates in science communication and leadership, intercultural communication, and medical humanities, Ishan has actively participated in various aspects of university life. Ishan is actively engaged in several leadership roles within university governance, serving as the student representative for Dal on both the Board of Governors and the Senate Learning and Teaching Committee. Yes. Ishan takes an active part in shaping the educational experience. Ishan holds a council position in the Dalhousie Student Union leadership and has held various leadership roles in societies, including as the chair of scholarship selection for the Dalhousie Science Society and as the academic representative for the Medical Sciences Society. Driven by a passion for community and advocacy, which I have experienced personally, Ishan has also founded two societies: the B4 Kai Society, which raises awareness for meningitis B in memory of Kai Matthews, who tragically passed away at the age of 19, and a society within the Dalhousie Science Scholars and Leaders Program, where Ishan also serves as program co-head and teaches a class aiming to empower a sense of belonging for marginalized and BIPOC students in STEM by guiding them through the unwritten rules and resources of university. Ishan is also a passionate advocate for students with intellectual and developmental disabilities, driven by his personal family background. Previously working as a student researcher in the Blood-Brain Barrier Lab in Dalhousie's Medical Neuroscience Department, Ishan also serves as vice president of the Concussion Legacy Foundation Halifax chapter and is an inaugural member of the recently established ad hoc Psychoeducational Assessment Bursary Committee. And now I am exhausted, but even more thrilled that you agreed to speak today. So please come up and let's give Ishan a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Quenta, for that introduction. I'm Ishan Aurora, and it's an honor to represent our student body at the kickoff of the second annual Accessibility Week. As we gather here today, I just wanted to share some reflections on what accessibility means to us as students and how it intertwines with our sense of belonging, particularly in our academic journeys. So accessibility, from a student's perspective, is grounded in understanding and empathy. It's about creating a rich learning environment where every one of us, with our own unique abilities and challenges, can not only feel fully engage and contribute, but feel fully included and supported. By recognizing the uniqueness of each student's journey and ensuring that our university's policies, teaching methods, and culture reflect this and support this diversity, we can ensure that students' individual needs don't become barriers to their learning, social lives, or personal development. The importance of creating an accessible learning environment is most evident in initiatives like the Nova Scotia 2030 Accessibility Goals. Education is one of the 6 key fundamental pillars in this plan towards a barrier-free province. These goals present an opportune future where our university doesn't just meet standards, but sets them, serving as a model for inclusivity and accessibility in education. As we align our efforts with these provincial goals, we have the opportunity to lead by example, to innovate, and to redefine what true accessibility looks like in an academic setting. This alignment isn't just about compliance. It's about being part of a larger vision that seeks to transform our society into one that values and upholds the rights and dignity of all its members. By making our spaces and resources accessible, we're not just ticking boxes. We'll be reshaping the culture of academia and showing every student that no matter what their background or challenges are, Dalhousie University values and supports you. And that feeling of belonging is something we all seek, especially in an academic university setting. Oftentimes, many students feel that they are not being seen, heard, and valued. Accessibility plays a key role in this. When we prioritize accessibility, we're not just removing barriers, we're sending a clear message to every student that they are an integral part of our community. In our journey through university, we all face profound challenges. But broader issues like burnout, masking, and overcompensation aren't just personal hurdles. They're echoes of a larger narrative within our academic culture. Think about the times we've pushed ourselves to the brink, striving to meet standards and expectations, and how that often leaves us feeling drained both emotionally and mentally. Consider the moments we've hidden aspects of our true selves, our struggles, and our needs, trying to fit into a mold of what we think is normal or expected. And then there's the tendency to stretch ourselves too thin, and going above and beyond, sometimes to the detriment of our own health. These experiences aren't isolated. They're shared among many of us, and speak volumes about the need for a more supportive, understanding, and accessible educational environment. We must recognize these challenges not just as issues at an individual level, but as signs of what needs to change in our approach to education and student well-being. These challenges are particularly pronounced among students from marginalized backgrounds. Statistics show that students from Black and Indigenous communities often require accommodations more frequently. This is not just a matter of physical or cognitive needs, but it's deeply tied to the systemic barriers and unique pressures these students face. It's a stark reminder of the intersectionality of accessibility, where race, culture, and disability intertwine, and that each letter of EDIA, equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility, are unique issues, but also simultaneously one and the same. As such, it is imperative that we as an academic community ensure that every student is equipped with the knowledge and resources to access the accommodations they deserve. In my 4 years here, I've spoken with many peers who are unaware of the existence of the Accessibility Center or the range of accommodations that are available. This lack of awareness is even more acute among first-generation students who might not have the advantage of navigating university academia through familial or community guidance. Therefore, in addition to making resources more available, our teaching process needs to be actively amplified in order to ensure that every student, especially those from traditionally underrepresented groups, are aware of these resources available to them in their university journey. We must strive to create an environment where seeking help and accommodations is normalized and adequately addressed. As we embark on this week dedicated to accessibility, I encourage all of us as members of Dalhousie to think about what we can do to make our campus more inclusive. Let's work towards a future university where the pressures of academic life don't overshadow our need for belonging and support, and where each of us can confidently say, I thrive here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ishan. I love that final message, I thrive here. That's part of an exceptional student experience, but when we think about our entire community, that's what we want for all of our faculty and staff, students as well. So thank you. What a powerful message. Oh, okay. I was looking for Chris. All right. So Dr. Harvey talked a little bit about the plan, and so our accessibility plan was released last April of 2022. And so we will launch this week an update to the university community broadly. And so, but today just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about some highlights over the past year. Put my glasses on this time. Okay. So oftentimes when people think about accessibility, they think about the built environment, which makes sense. In order to access our spaces, signage and wayfinding, those types of things need to be done well, done from a universal design lens. And so lots of progress has been made in the past couple of years. And so in terms of our commitment to the built environment is that buildings and outdoor spaces on Dalhousie University's campuses provide meaningful access for intended users. And so there have been several different projects that have taken place over the past year, from classroom renewal to elevator renewal, corridor signage, corridor door operator, tactile attention indicators, main entrance renewal, and fire alarm upgrades. And so a couple of other highlights, specific highlights in reference to the built environment. Dalhousie's accessibility audit program, led by facilities management, continues to update building accessibility data. And so this time period extends beyond 2022. So between May 2018 and March 2023, the accessibility audit identified over 1,000 barriers that have been removed on all of our campuses. The creation of residence rooms and residence front desks that are completely accessible. And there were 2 grants that were received that helped to facilitate some of our work. So one from Employment and Social Development Canada to offset accessibility renovation costs at the Life Sciences Centre common area and the Oceanography Tower exterior entrances. And so this particular project implementation is scheduled for the summer of 2024. And another grant received from Nova Scotia Community Accessibility to offset accessibility renovation costs at the B building, level 2 male and gender neutral accessible restroom renovation on the Sexton campus. That project is currently under renovation with the expected completion this fall. Okay. A lot of multitasking up here. The glass is on, they're off, the reading, the buttons. It's a lot. The bios, the fabulous bios. So our commitment to teaching, learning, and research. So one of the things that I do want to point out about this particular commitment is that within the province and their 6 standards, we align very well with all of them. We've expanded, so for the province, they refer to it as education. We refer to it as teaching, learning, and research because we want to ensure that the work that we are doing here at Dalhousie, our goal really is to exceed what the standards recommendations are, and so we wanted to ensure that we were taking into consideration all of the areas that we interact with faculty, staff, and students in this area. So I'll speak to our Faculty of Health colleagues. They have provided faculty members with training on universal design for learning and culturally responsive pedagogy with the goal of at least 50% of all health faculty being trained. So the Faculty's Inclusion and Equity Committee implemented a survey to obtain a baseline measurement for how UDL and CRP are being implemented within courses with over a 50% response rate from faculty. So Faculty of Health doing some leadership work there. And the School of Social Work has an in-house accommodations officer who helps students navigate their accommodations, both formal and informal. There have been some internal professional development related to document creation by sharing internal expertise and also inviting external facilitators, so recognizing the expertise that is both in and outside of Dalhousie and in our individual units and across our departments and faculties. Facilitation of workshops, retreats, studio courses, and consultations that focus on and incorporate universal design for learning. And so this is so important because I think about, Ishan, part of your messaging about just normalizing accommodation, but with an ultimate goal to try and reduce or remove the need for accommodation if we're designing things in such a way that eliminate those processes. Collaboration with faculties to review and effectively support the implementation of student accommodations. And the IDEIA Collective has been established, which is a group of units that deliver education, including our Center for Learning and Teaching, Human Resources and Equity Services, and Human Resources, on EDIA matters to ensure consistent approaches, including an inclusive language guide that's currently under development. And this past year, we also launched the Faculty and Staff Guide to Student Accommodations and Student Accessibility to advise on proactive strategies and tools to facilitate inclusive classrooms and identify other available Dalhousie resources to support students with accessibility needs as reflected in the Nova Scotia Post-Secondary Accessibility Framework. And our commitment to goods and services. Students, employees, and visitors with disabilities or others who experience barriers to accessibility have equitable access to goods and services provided by DAL. So there's been investment in technology for a procure-to-pay solution to make the procurement of goods and services more accessible to end users, employees, and the supplier network. The Student Accessibility Center received a donation to increase and complement the inventory in their assistive technology lending library. And so the lending library was launched to support students who may benefit from various assistive technologies. And so recognizing that sometimes there's a financial barrier to using those tools, students have an opportunity to borrow as similarly as they would a book from the Killam, try it out, test it out, figure if they want to make the investment, and also have some training on it with our technology advisor. And probably one of the most exciting pieces, maybe I shouldn't qualify that, Jen, but the Student Accessibility Center, after a really competitive request for purchase, launched a new accessible software to streamline the student accommodation process. The process to request and obtain accommodations is now centrally managed in one platform, achieving efficiencies for students, staff, and faculty users. So again, with the goal to reduce or remove barriers when people are accessing services. Chris?
So moving into information and communication, our commitment around this pillar is ensuring all people can receive, understand, and share the information provided by Dalhousie. And I think to Tara's point earlier, what we see as a major barrier is often attitudinal, and having a significant communication programs in place to help break down some of the attitudinal barriers that we see is a key part of this pillar. One of the major accomplishments of the past year was holding our inaugural Accessibility Week in November 2022. That has now been moving into its second year, and I think we're incredibly proud to be able to offer the Accessibility Week as a regular annual event, which highlights and showcases firsthand voices and gives everyone in our community an opportunity to learn more about accessibility and members of our community. And we've also incorporated accessibility features in non-academic and educational training programs, and an audit is currently being undertaken of education materials to ensure they incorporate accessibility features. We've also, across campus, been looking at the introduction of alternative platforms for communication for employees with accessibility needs, including the opportunity to have in-person and hybrid meetings, having closed captions on most video-based meetings, availability of American Sign Language interpreters, and improved use of Braille across campus. We've also made enhancements to the Be Counted survey, which is currently out, with the introduction of additional questions to follow up on equity, diversity, inclusion, and accessibility progress. Another area around information and communication that we wanted to highlight relates to the campus tour experience, with significant work being undertaken over the past year to increase the accessibility of campus tours. That includes a new video of virtual guided campus tours that's currently under development by CMC, as well as a circuit of virtual tours of faculties that are available at dal.ca/campus tours. We've incorporated land acknowledgements at the start of each tour, offer sensory-friendly tours on Saturdays, instituted the use of battery pack microphones during tours to enhance audio, and have tour guides map out accessible routes and provide directions to accessible routes and elevators for those with mobility considerations. Moving into transportation, over the past year, facilities management and collaboration with the Sustainability Office have received funding to conduct a review of both our natural environment policies as well as the active transportation policies, which will lead to significant improvements to our campus over time in the area of accessible transportation. A major project over the last year to highlight was facilities management in partnership with sustainability, upgrading a portion of the Killam Library sidewalk adjacent to the University Avenue Loop. The new sidewalk removed uneven concrete and gravel paths and upgraded the portion. Now has widened sidewalks and improved safer and more accessible navigation at a key corner of our campus. And the final of the 6 pillars is employment, where our commitment is that Dalhousie University is an accessible and equitable employer, supporting the careers of employees with disabilities or others who experience barriers to accessibility, and ensures their employees reflect the diversity of Nova Scotians. Over the past year, a major piece of work in the area of accessibility has been the continued presence and expansion of our accessible employment unit and its collaboration with other units across campus to assess and address barriers to accessibility. I would highlight that my colleague Orla McDevitt, who I don't think was able to join us today, this year received the DPMG Award for EDIA for her work in the area of accessible employment. And a huge congrats to Orla. Another major initiative on the employment side has been the facilitation of third-party ergonomic assessments through licensed occupational therapist professionals for situations that require an in-depth assessment of ergonomic needs, as well as an expanding partnership with students in our occupational therapy program to offer accessible ergonomic assessments for our staff. We've also created a fund in accessible employment to help offset treatment and other assessment costs for employees who are in extenuating circumstances and might not be able to access medical care needed to have access to the workplace. An update to the accommodation policy took place, and the revised policy has now been made available on MyDAO through different formats to enhance its accessibility. The Registrar's Office has implemented consistent hiring practices that take into consideration lived experience with a focus on ensuring equity hiring, and we're working at expanding the use of lived experience and alternative credential assessments into all of our hiring across campus. And we've also purchased adaptive technology for employees to ensure accessibility needs are addressed, and the incorporation of assistive technology services where barriers are identified, including carts, headphones, and ergonomic equipment for employees with those requirements.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So this was just a fraction of the activity and progress that has happened over the past year. But you'll see that it's happening across faculties and administrative units and with students and with staff and faculty. And so it really demonstrates our obligation an emphasis that accessibility is everyone's responsibility. It doesn't just sit with a particular department or unit, it sits with all of us as individuals. And I hope that this was inspirational and so that you can take away some things, and if there are pieces that you can, some of the work that you can incorporate into your own units and departments, I encourage you to do so. And just know that there are, to Tara's point, allies here, that if there are questions or concerns or, hey, I'm not quite sure, or what if, lots of people in this room, but also across the university, if you would like to do some follow-up. So now I would like to introduce our spoken word performer. And just give me a second here. Just give me a sec. Oops, sorry. Yes, I had it.
Did I knock it down?
No, I don't think so. Laura Burke. Laura, come on up. And my apologies because I do not have your bio. Okay, come on up. Laura is going to do a spoken word performance. I do remember that you're a counselor and very committed to breaking down barriers as it relates to marginalized communities. You are from Shabuktuk. I do remember that as well.
I am now, yeah.
Okay, okay, so we're currently resides in Shabuktuk. I'm going to hand it over to you and then try and find my bio so that I can actually do you justice. But please join. Can we give at least Laura a warm welcome?
Thank you so much. And it's kind of nice to not have a bio because then I find there's something about hierarchy and status and resumes that it's almost like, and I found as someone who's faced saneism and ableism in my life that the more, diagnostic categories next to your name, the longer your resume has to be to offset it. And I'd just like to kind of sidestep that whole process right now because I think, people with different otherness, different disabilities, and different experiences can speak to their, experience without resumes sometimes. And as was said earlier, we can only speak for ourselves. We can't speak for other people with disabilities or other kinds of disabilities or other experiences even within the same category. And so I'm speaking only from my own experience as a person who identifies as MAD, which is MAD pride is similar to gay pride, queer pride that we know very well in our world now. It's basically arises from psychiatric survivor pride, and it's about surviving mental health systems and injustices that people have faced for millennia around identification of madness. But the word mad is, of course, a reclamation. It's not meant as a slur. So that's my lived experience. And the first poem I'm going to do is from an outside looking in on another disability group, because I did a placement in grad school at what was Philip Layton School for the Blind in Montreal. And without realizing it, I had some assumptions going in about just the capacity of these students. And I was really hit with my own assumptions when I walked through. So I showed up at my placement at the School for the Blind with a briefcase full of assumptions about the kind of children I would be helping. The first morning I sat in on a math class, a boy dropped a numbered block off the side of his desk. The teacher heard it hit the floor and without missing a beat said, "It's a 100, Joey, off to the right of your foot by the door." Now the thing I never mentioned was that this teacher couldn't see. Unlike me, she and these kids all heard the symphony of subtlety and were empowered by this place to realize their immense capacity. The children tore through those hallways with graceful abandon. Their footsteps hit the ground like it was rising to meet them on their way toward the sky. They knew walls not as obstacles, but as points on a map that would guide them to secret passageways that opened into tomorrow. They never needed to borrow my hope or my vision, for their ideas were a spring-fed waterfall of brilliance and delight. Their laughter was the sound of night awakening into sunrise. Their bright faces shone light into places left dark from the ignorance of people like me. To my surprise, I came to question my own eyes, as it was they who taught me how to see. So that's the first one. And this one is, I think it speaks to people of all kinds of experiences of madness and otherness and disability, but it is from my own lived experience again, as someone who's encountered the mental health system as a young person and experienced that psychiatrization up till this point. We are all born of the same artist's hands. It's just that some of us are curious and we broke out of the mold before we were dry and tore down the street like mischievous gingerbread children escaping the oven before we were baked. Because of this, some of us have hardened into some interesting shapes. And some of us are a bit more malleable, more squishy. We may fall apart more easily, but personally, I have always preferred a shapeshifter to a stock character, a street performer to a statue. I appreciate those who can fit into many different puzzles, have soft pieces that fit like putty into holes in the bottom of wooden boats. We may be unpredictable, but we're sometimes the pieces that keep the world afloat. And if we can't hold on, we'll be the first to tell you there's a leak. Like canaries in coal mines, our voices are anything but meek. We forget that canaries are songbirds, and when we stop singing, that is when the warning bells start ringing. Yes, we have a purpose. To tell the rest of the world we're in trouble, even if they're too busy to have heard this avalanche beginning. We are just one card short of a winning hand in a game to which we were never invited. And yet, we are the burgeoning flame ignited by heat just below the surface of the earth. We are the continuous death and rebirth of our world lit up in technicolor to remind the rest of us how fragile and beautiful it all is. But somehow, we still struggle with what to call it, as if it's a thing and not a dynamic and living process. Too bright to be documented, too flexible to be nailed down, and like all gingerbread people, we sometimes break, only to reconfigure ourselves into unrecognizable shapes. Just like lobsters. As they grow, they shed their shells, and when they emerge, they are soft as jelly. So like them, when we are in this state, we just need a safe place to recalibrate and harden once more before we can return to our lives on the sea floor. And in this space, we need supports to complete our process of becoming. For we are still soft, and in the midst of a storm, the harsh tides of the world permeate through us as we transform. And some of us are meant to feel it like a hammer. Some of us are meant to scream just loud enough to wake up the sleeping children before the wolf comes to eat them. Some of us know we are not invincible because we can feel it in our bones, in every molecule, in our veins, in our broken hearts struggling to circulate enough blood to our limbs to remember to dance in the rain, even though we know it is the beginning of a flood. We have fulfilled our role when we are respected and loved for the beacons that we are, even if we sometimes break. As long as we are seen as crazy ones to be controlled, the less likely we are to fulfill our roles as healers, as artists, as wise ones, as community leaders, and those who may feel things before anyone else does. Crazy is a metaphor for being touched through the boundaries of your skin. We're here to make the world more beautiful, and we are often the ones who fly as close as we can to the sun. But even if we fall, I can still look up to the sky and say, wow, I forgot to notice the sun at all until you showed me how. That's that one. Okay, so this is my last poem. It's the longest one, but it's really the most about my personal experience and thinking about sanism. And sanism is a term that is just, I don't know if you're all familiar, it's probably a lot of you might be. It's just the term for discrimination against people with known or perceived mental illness that is a subset of ableism. This is just my perspective about traversing this world, looking through that lens. I've had a great deal of time to relax as the train follows its course to the end of the track. And as we ride past the sea, I begin to think about the things that float and those that sink. And I think that although I've taken a few licks, the big bad wolf hasn't succeeded with his tricks, for I escaped on this train heading east at 80 clicks to live safe and warm inside a house made of bricks. But sometimes I wonder as I look up at the sky, are these stars so far away that they've already died? But I remember that the light that is caught by my eye still provides the function of shining and gleaming, supplying light for navigation and for wishing and dreaming. But once upon a time, I woke up screaming, and while I scanned the dark room for shadows and sources of meaning, I found I myself was the origin of this terrifying sound. So I decided to hop this train and head east, out of town. It didn't occur to me for a while if what I was running from might be madness, not to be confused with ordinary fear, rage, or sadness. But a level of any emotion, perhaps all three of these plus more, that get stuck on at full volume while your mind opens the door to boundless possibilities. Like a helium balloon in a hurricane, my thoughts forget to follow a map or to leave any sort of breadcrumbs so that I may eventually find my way back. And because of this untethered nature, others have become afraid of the unpredictable actions of the baffling choices I've made. For we all seek to understand, and if we cannot find a way into the land where madness reigns, we pull the mad one back to earth and call their foreignness insane. And if reason is supreme, and if the measure we use excludes those who go left instead of up and right instead of down, and we drop the mad one in the river of reason, of course, they surely drown. Yes, if a person cannot find a mad woman's reason, she is left out of the rhyme. Her mere existence is treason. But some don't jive with the straitjackets, the labels that define folks like us as mentally disordered or disabled. They instead divine the ancient wisdom of the folks whose shapes will shift. Those who dare to travel landscapes of transcendent terror and bliss. Those who whisper in the ears of forest gods and spirits. They provide a strong resistance to the violence of those systems that suppress the dreams, the visions that exist in ferocious opposition to stock markets and microwave dinners, RRSPs and cartoon minions. And are these dreamers, these ethereal creatures, too permeable to hold court against the encroaching, cold, gray features of concrete big-box suburban chains that sell witty memes on T-shirts, the division, the competition that our network news world teaches? Perhaps. Or it could be noted that we are growing in numbers. After all, what kind of sensitive human can continue to bend around the pressures, the tyranny of working to achieve these arbitrary measures that count our steps and calories and other performative acts of leisure without at some point breaking? And lately, there are more humans reaching thresholds of madness. They say approximately 1/2 of all human beings alive today will enter atypical states of mood, perception, or cognition at some point in their lifetime on this planet. But this mission is still a lonely one, as we are commonly pariahs, Exiled through polite abandonment, these eccentric messiahs walk the same streets as other humans, but deemed insipid fools and liars, we hear only echoes of connection in back alleys where steel barrel fires blaze. And wayward drifters share stories of the underworld and quickly pass their days. For saneism upholds a world built only for the sane, with near intangible levels of blind discrimination so interwoven through this fabric of mass production and entertainment that those who gaze outside the windows from their cubicle stations are quickly named insurgents, or worse, an active danger to the acceleration of progress in its elaborate machine that supports the individual, the North American dream. And the mad excel at dreaming more than anyone else, we could say. It is inside these nighttime landscapes where their higher spirits play. But these nighttime creatures dream dreams whose main features are indecipherable to the average, and so their dreams are misread. And these wild, well-meaning dreamers run the risk of being told that there's something terrible that's gone wrong in their heads, tossed in pathological purgatory, in solitary, in psych wards, where their dreams fly like doves into glass ceilings, hitting the edges of the sky, and falling, whimpering, shaking, they die. So mad dreamers are forced into hiding. In order to survive, they are required to deny their knowledge of the true expanse of the sky. The mad winged souls are forced to pretend. Yes, all the world's a stage, especially when you're playing for your freedom. And the alternative, well, how far can you bend? How many times can one bend until breaking? I've done it quite often, and indeed it has shaped me. Yet what possible shape can be made up of shards of shattered mind parts? Well, you know, in Japan, cracks are filled in with gold, increasing the value of any old thing. Take my broken mind. Can't you see it shining? All right, maybe not. Maybe gold is for vases. Plus, I think in Japan, mental breakshakes or losses are far from accepted as national causes. Those affected are lumped with the lowest of caste, like most places, I suppose. But then again, I wouldn't know, as I'd never be asked. But in India, many years before writing things down, there existed a story of a Hindu goddess of the south called Akilandeshvari. Yes, her name was carried wherever words were spoken. Its meaning in Sanskrit is never not broken. Never not breaking apart into multiple selves, ever changing and shaking and tender as hell. She leans into confusion and deep ambiguity as her identity won't hold. But she sees the opportunity born of breaking wide open, of having no self as ground. She shouts into the abyss until it teaches her that the sound of her own voice has always been and is constantly changing. Every note on the octave, every word rearranging. And oh, there is more to her elemental strangeness. She rides atop a crocodile, representing the fear of her reptilian brain. She rides it as she spins in the river of her emotional pain. And all of this, while Akalanda resists any urge to hop off and find refuge in lists, either to do or to be, either tend to exist just to stave off these fears that she knows she must face of complete annihilation with no path to retrace. So she leans into the ride, and she breaks, and she breaks. And every time her heart shatters, she becomes herself more and more, less and less of a projection of the roles built before. For years, I have been striving for this talent at reinvention. The question I have, if you can hold my intention, is, will you let me and let others let go? Let some of these hard lines between us dissolve. Will you let go of this string as we float beyond your view, as we melt into and evaporate into exactly who we are moment to moment? And as you do, and you do, and you. Because sometimes a breakdown is really a breakthrough. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. And I appreciated your feedback around where you introductions and biographies. And what I'm so disappointed about that I misplaced yours is that it was more about who you are and not what you do. And I think that was an awesome representation. Thank you so much. Can we just acknowledge again? Thank you. Siobhan, would you like to come up and close out our launch?
Hi, everyone. So I'm just going to give a brief overview of all the events that are going to be taking place for the rest of the week. So tomorrow, Tuesday, November 28th, we will be having an online lunch and learn. It's an introduction to accessible events and meetings. This event is being hosted by the Nova Scotia Accessibility Directorate, where the presentation will guide participants through building accessibility into planning, hosting, and presenting at online and in-person events and meetings. On Wednesday, November 29th, we will be hosting a film screening and discussion. It'll be hosted online and in person at the LSC Common in room 236. The film is called Our Hearts Aren't Disabled by Josh Dunn. And the film will examine the romantic lives and trials of 6 people living with mobility challenges. And the film sheds light on the difficulties he and others face. On Thursday, November 30th, we will be hosting another lunch and learn called Bridging the Digital Divide by Microsoft Canada. And this this presentation will provide a presentation demonstrating how we all play a critical role in creating a world in which everyone can participate, and how we can use technology to be enablers to do this, to create experiences and opportunities for everyone to be more included. And then in the evening, on Thursday, November 30th, there will be a panel discussion called Debunking Ableism, hosted by Dalhousie School of Social Work and their Diversity and Equity Committee conversation series in collaboration with Dal's Disability Caucus. This panel will be hosted by Judy McDonald. And on Friday, December 1st, there will be a virtual lunch and learn about how Dalhousie manages student and employee accommodations. So this informative lunch and learn will welcome Jen Davis, the manager of our Student Accessibility Center, and Orla McDevitt, the Director of Accessible Employment, Lisa DeLong from our Director of Human Rights and Equity Services, and it'll be moderated by our very own Quenta Adams. So those will be the scheduled events that are happening throughout the week. What we also have on the Accessibility Week website are what's being called What It's Like web series. So we are hosting this web series through Today at Dal, and it showcases first-person stories from our campus community of people's experiences living with visible and invisible disabilities. So those who would like to submit to these series are invited to do so online and answer a short survey via email, or can be through a phone interview. These can also be anonymous or not anonymous as well. So if you're interested in submitting that, or you would like to read them, visit the Accessibility Week's website for more information. And all of the registration links to all of these events are posted on the Accessibility Plan's Accessibility Week website, and you can also see them in the Today at Dal schedule of events to register to attend any of them. And there's also more details about the International Day of Persons with Disabilities, which will be observed on December 3rd. And we are just so excited to have all of these events and look forward to having you all attend, participate, and enjoy our second annual Accessibility Week. So now we will head to the quad on this lovely rainy day for the flag raising. Thank you.